This is the video on respiratory system. So we are going to learn the function of respiratory system, and then we are going to go into the detailed anatomy of the system. I have all models so that we can get a view of the available models in the lab. So first and foremost, I'm going to go over a little bit of description about the respiratory system, a little bit of lecture on it, and then we are going to learn about the different parts of the respiratory system, okay? So, what is the respiratory system? So mainly the respiratory system helps us to breathe, and it's very easy for anyone to understand that this process is the main function of the respiratory system. We generally don't think when we are breathing, right? So our body regulates the process of breathing, which you have learned earlier, is through brain, and that happens very involuntarily as we do our day-to-day lives, or even when we are sleeping. Our cells obtain oxygen and release carbon dioxide. When these gases diffuse across the respiratory exchange surfaces inside the lungs, so lungs becomes a very, very important part of the respiratory system, where a moist or warm air comes from the environment, and eventually what happens is the cells are able to receive in oxygen and give out of the carbon dioxide through the process of respiration. One thing to remember is that respiratory system and the cardiovascular system pretty much work hand in hand in order to circulate these gases to different parts or cells of your body, and to remove the carbon dioxide that is generated by the cells to the lungs, so that the proper exchange can be taken. Okay, so going forward, so what is the function of respiratory system? Let's see, some of the major functions of the respiratory system is moving air to and from the lungs, which I'm pretty sure all of you understand, and it creates an extensive area for gas exchange, okay? There are several protective surfaces, several tissue layers that help in the process of the gas exchange. The other part is the production of voice or sound. So I can speak right now because my respiratory system is working efficiently. See, so this sound production, whether I can, make a sound very softly, or I can scream, I can sing, I can shout, I can whisper, all of these sounds that are created is through the respiratory system. The last is olfaction. We never think about it. Yes, olfaction, respiratory, one of the major function of our respiratory system is smell. You can smell something because of the respiratory system. So the respiratory system is divided into two major parts. One is the upper respiratory system, which you can see it in here. This is the upper respiratory system, and this is the lower respiratory system. So it starts with nose, then goes into nasal cavity. Then there are sinuses. You can see all of these sinuses in here, and then goes into pharynx. We'll learn more about pharynx eventually, but remember this in itself, all of these structures or organs are part of the upper respiratory system. The lower respiratory system, on the other hand, is the main part that does the work, that is exchange of gases. The upper respiratory system is more like a conduction. It helps to conduct or move in the air into the body. The lower respiratory system includes the larynx, which is also known as the voice box, This is trachea, which is also known as the windpipes. And then there are bronchial, primary, secondary, tertiary bronchi and bronchioles, which ultimately leads into the lungs, where the final exchange of gases take place in the alveoli, which is in here. These are air sac-like structure where the final exchange of gases take place. So as I said, there is a respiratory zone and there is a conducting zone, which helps in the entire process of the respiration. So this shows you the starting point, which is the nose and the nasal cavity. Let's see if I can. So if you look in this, so you will understand that this is definitely the nose, and it is divided into left and right, right? And you can see the nares, these are called the nares. And in here, there are 3 cartilage that you can see it in here, 1, 2, and 3, okay? These are known as conchae. So this is superior, middle, and inferior conchae. Superior, middle, and inferior conchae. And there are grooves in here, as you can see it in here. These grooves are called meatus. This is superior, middle, and inferior meatus. And if you remember, meatus means a narrow passage. So these are the different meatus and conchae, cartilaginous tubes, which are present in order for air to pass in from the nose. And in here, what happens is they bombard against the walls of these cartilages or conchae. As a result, couple of things happen. Number one is the air actually comes in contact with the mucus and the hair in the nasal cavity. As a result, any sort of pathogen, bacteria, dust particles gets trapped. The other and the more important part is it causes humidification of the air. So you might be taking in hot air, and that hot air might be really detrimental for the heart, for the lungs. But what happens is this humidification helps to bring the air into the physiological temperature of your body. As a result, this helps in the entire process, okay? So this is where we can see the conchae, so the nose, and these are the conchae. And in here, you will be able to see also a couple of things. This is the frontal sinus, this is the ethmoid sinus, and this is the sphenoid sinus. Okay, so these are a couple of things also, which is also necessary for the conducting of air, which finally goes into the lungs. Okay, so let me share the screen so that it makes sense. So here we are, that's what we were learning, if you remember. So these are the conchae and superior, middle, and inferior conchae, which then goes into what is called the pharynx, okay? The pharynx is actually, if you can see it well, the pharynx starts from here, okay? So remember, there are 2 parts of the pharynx. One that goes straight from the nose and leads here. The other which goes from the mouth and leads here. So the first part of the pharynx, if you see this part which comes straight from the nose, is known as the nasopharynx, and the one that comes straight from the mouth is known as the oropharynx, okay? They join together to form what is called the laryngopharynx, and from there, it actually leads to what is called the larynx, okay? Larynx is the voice box. It's the voice box, and it leads into the larynx. The part that it leads to is called the glottis, okay? And I will explain more, but I want you to see this very well, that there is a lid here on top of it. If you can see it well, this lid is called the epiglottis, okay? Epiglottis, and I'll explain that in a different model better, but the air actually comes into the larynx through these folds, and this is the glottis, but there is a lid on top of it, which is known as the epiglottis, okay? So from here, so this is, you can go over some of the major functions of the nose and the paranasal sinuses. There are tonsils present in there also. One of the major tonsils is this in here, which is known as the pharyngeal tonsil. This tonsil in here is known as a palatine tonsil. And the other tonsil is very hard to see it in here, which is known as the lingual tonsil, which is behind your mouth. Okay. So as I was saying, so this is the nasopharynx, which comes straight from the nose. The oropharynx, they join together to form the laryngopharynx, and then it goes into the trachea, and there's a lid in here, which is known as the epiglottis. Okay, so then comes larynx. Okay, so let's okay, so next we come into this model, which will help you to understand it better. So if you remember, we stopped at a point where we were saying that it goes into what is called the larynx. So you can see it in this larynx. This is the voice box. You can feel it in here. It is, consists of 3 unpaired cartilages, okay? So one is the thyroid cartilage, which you can see it in here. You can feel that it's known as the Adam's apple. And there is, which is known as the cricoid cartilage, which is in here. And then there is epiglottis, which is here. So thyroid cartilage, cricoid cartilage is just below it. And then there is epiglottis. Just remember, there is another part in here which is missing because I want to show you the inner parts of it, okay? So if you look in here, you will be able to see that the air actually comes into this region, which is the glottis. This glottis, remember, are the vocal folds. These vocal folds, we also call them vocal cords. And the upper fold is known as the false cord, and this is known as a true cord, okay, or false fold or true fold, okay. So these, and then from the trachea, it then goes into from the larynx, it goes into the trachea. Now the trachea are C-shaped cartilages, okay? So what I mean by C-shaped cartilages is, if you look in here, you'll see this region is open. It's C in shape because this is where the esophagus is. So it lets the esophagus expand and contract. As a result, it is absolutely necessary that this should be open so that the esophagus can expand and contract when the food is present or not, okay? Then from here, the trachea then divides into what is called the bronchioles or bronchi. The initial ones are known as primary bronchi, then secondary bronchi, and the ends are known as the tertiary bronchi. I want you to understand that these, divisions of the bronchi is further. There is segmental bronchi, then bronchioles, then it goes into further branching, which ultimately leads into what is called alveoli. Alveoli is where the main exchange of gases take place, which is inside the lung. So the primary bronchi is outside the lung, and the point where it divides, this point is known as the carina. So this point is known as the carina, and these are the primary bronchi, which then goes into the lungs for further exchange of gases. Okay. So now we are looking at the lungs. So if you can see it in here, these are the lungs. This is the right lung and this is the left lung. And the right lung has three major parts, 1, 2, and 3. And this is known as the superior lobe, middle lobe, and the inferior lobe, okay? Superior, middle, and inferior lobe. And there are certain fissures which divide them. This fissure is known as the horizontal fissure. This is known as the oblique fissure, okay? So which divides each of these lobes. The other part is the lung of the lung is the left lung. I want you to notice one very specific indentation, and this indentation in here, this is known as the cardiac notch, okay? This is known as a cardiac notch because as you can see, the heart is actually nested in there, and that's the reason it's known as the cardiac notch. The left lung has two parts. Number one is the superior lobe and the inferior lobe, and the fissure is known as the oblique fissure. Okay, so that is pretty much how the lungs are. So these lungs definitely help in the entire process, and these lungs are mainly responsible in the exchange of gases in the respiratory system.